Okay, welcome again. To start with part 2 for today, solving almost 27 or 28 questions just like the previous part, the previous video. Starting with question number, question number 28, and that will be, which two statements about exterior routing protocols are true? To allow the exterior like only BGP. Number one, they determine the optimal path. Okay, just because I'm having some issues with my pen right now, but they determine the optimal path within an autonomous system. This means that those protocols does calculate the best path to a destination, but that destination resides inside or within your autonomous system, inside your network. This is nonsense because this is not what the exterior is all about. Okay, the exterior is about different autonomous systems, connecting and routing between different autonomous systems. The interior is about within the autonomous system. Okay, so they might be determining the optimal path between autonomous systems. That is correct. BGP is the current standard exterior routing protocol. This is the one and only, the only man standing. Most modern networking supports both EGP and BGP for external routing. Both EGP, EGP means the ancestor of BGP, which has been totally deleted. Okay. Most modern network routers support both EGP and EIGRP for external routing. Partially that's correct. That's not a mistake, because there is something called external EIGRP and there is something called external OSPF. Yeah, there is such thing. We can sometimes use them for external routing between autonomous systems, yes, and for redistribution also, but that's not a best practice nor preferred. But I'm sorry, the option says EGP and EIGRP. No, if it was BGP and EIGRP, it would be correct. But EGP has been deleted. By the way, EGP in this question means the old protocol that was called EGP, the Exterior Gateway Protocol, okay, which was replaced and developed to become the Border Gateway Protocol, the BGP. This doesn't mean a family of EGPs, only the name of protocol. So this one is definitely incorrect. So was the PCR correct, and it wants the question was for us to answer, to choose two answers only. Yeah. 29. What is the destination MAC address of a broadcast frame when flooding happens? You remember that from chapter 2. We have talked about that a lot in chapter 2 and in chapter 5 with frames, also with security. It will be Fs, all ones. So in hexadecimal, ones equals Fs. Okay, after converting. Question 30. You have configured a router with an OSPF router ID. Good, that would be manual, but its IP address still reflects the physical interface. So what does it mean? Is that I have a router that's operating using OSPF. Okay, I hope that I'm not talking too fast. And one of the interfaces has some IP address, whatever, and the router ID, the OSPF router ID of this router is this interface. This interface is IP address. What you did, you came in, you configured this guy with a new router ID of your choice, but when you show IP OSPF, you will see that the router ID, the OSPF router's ID is still stuck at this one. What should you do? You should not restart the interface. You should not reload your router. It's okay, just you can restart the OSPF process with some advanced commands that will shut down and reshut and reinitiate all the OSPF messages. That will be reload the OSPF process. Okay. Specify loopback address, no, because the manual will be more preferred than loopback. Reboot the router, not that much. You are a network engineer that should provide 24/7 services. Do not reload the router for such thing. And save the router config. This makes no sense, because once it's in the running config, it's the same thing. It doesn't really affect migrating it to the startup config. It will be A. Okay. Question 31. Which two statements about VLAN trunking protocol are true? Yes, it has been removed from the CCNA, the VTP, but I have already described it briefly and in a good way in the bundle of April in the previous 6 videos in one of them. It says that all switches must be configured with the same VTP domain name. Definitely correct, because when you have multiple switches in your network and you want to enable VTP to all of them, there are some elements or some commands or lines that you will configure in all of those switches, and those will be the domain name, which is only a name of a group, a version, a VTP version, because there are version 1, 2, and 3, and also password, okay, for that domain name to match between all of them. And the fourth optional thing will be the revision number, which mostly will not touch it. But the idea is, or I'm sorry, and the mode, server, a client, and transparent, or even a master. But for the domain name, password, and version, those three must match, copied and pasted between all the entire switches, all of them. It must be. So all switches must be covered with the same domain. Yes, with the same domain, with the same password, with the same version. All switches must be configured to perform trunk negotiation. By default, is not really that thing. All switches must be configured with a unique domain name. Definitely incorrect. The VTP server must have the highest revision number in the domain. That is correct. It says choose 2. All switches must use the same VTP version. That is also correct. What should I do? A cannot be manipulated. All of them must have the same domain name, the same version, the same password. So A's also cannot be manipulated and cannot be left or neglected. For D, it says that the VTP server must have the highest revision number in the domain. That is correct. If it was choose 3, I would definitely take it. If it was choose 2, then I will leave it, because those two things are some things that I must configure in the beginning. Later, this thing could happen in the future about the revision number and manipulating the number of revision, or changing it to transparent, to raise all the counter of the revision. Those are details that have been removed entirely. Okay, VTP is no longer in the CCNA, neither in the CCNP course. I believe Cisco knows that it was neglected. Few enterprises or companies used VTP, so it's not really that big deal. Okay, but for this question, just for the sake of this question, A and E are correct to pass this question. Okay. 32. Which two pieces of information about a Cisco device can CDP communicate? Two things that will be communicated between two Cisco devices, one link will be enough, that are using CDP between both of them. Number one, the native VLAN. Let's make it a switch. Maybe. Number two, the trunking protocol. No. Number three, the VTP domain. Possibly. We will need a lot to check that. And no, spanning tree will not be. Spanning tree information will not be advertised by some CDP messages. But if you establish a lab, I'm sorry, or if you do establish a lab on Backtracer or on GNS3 or even G, and enable CDP on both devices, and hit like maybe show CDP neighbor detail, hit enter, and see all the exact details and all those specific details about your neighbor. Mostly we'll find the native VLAN and the VTP as part of those information about your neighbor. Okay, so that will be A and C for this question. One of the questions that you should not mistake with is a forwarding decision on R1. Which good guy will take handle of this? 192.168.10.1. Let's see. Dot 12 is bigger. Dot 13 is bigger than 10. It starts beyond that. After that, dot 14 is not good. Dot 10 is good, but there is no protocol for that, meaning that this is a father, and those are the good guys that we need to talk about. 10.0/24 definitely correct because it's included. 10.32 begins after 10.0. It's the same IP address and same commands of the previous video. Okay, difference in the option only. 0.0 is very good, but there is something more specific, so leave it. 10.1/32, which is the host route, is much more specific than 10.0, so I will choose that. And the protocol for that is D, and D is EIGRP, so I will pick EIGRP. As simple as that. Okay, just like I informed you or mentioned in the previous video, this question with the same IP address, same information, same image or exhibit will be duplicated in the exam like for 3 or 4 times. One of them asking you which metric will take it. So it will always be like this line, depends on the question. But in the 4 questions, if it was the same line that will handle the packet, question number 1 will be asking what type of routing. So it will be a host route, okay, because it's /32. Question number 2 will be which protocol. According to D, it's CIGRP. Question number 3 will say which administrative distance. It's 90. Question number 4 will be like which metric. It will be 52,000 and such. Maybe question number 5 will be which next hop. Will be fast Ethernet 00, or which next hop address. This one. You see, this line has a ton of information. All of them can be asked as questions, separated questions. Okay. For now, it will be D, EIGRP. Question 34. Which VLAN ID is associated with the default VLAN in the given environment? In Cisco switches, you have 2 types of abnormal VLANs: default VLAN and native VLAN. Default VLAN by default in Cisco switches equals VLAN number 1. Native VLAN equals VLAN number 1. And both of them travels in the domain and tagged. But what's the difference then? If both of them equals VLAN ID number 1, both of them travels untagged, then the idea will be default VLAN cannot be changed at all. They will always be VLAN number 1. Native VLAN can be changed. Just like this commands or this config, native VLAN is 10, native VLAN is 10. You can't change the native VLAN. The default VLAN can never be changed or deleted in Cisco switches. Whenever you see a default VLAN, it's VLAN number 1. Don't check the config. It cannot be configured. Okay? Default VLAN is always VLAN number 1. Okay? So that will be A for this question. 35. Which 2 circumstances can prevent 2 routers from establishing an OSPF neighbor adjacency? Oh, why would that happen? Number 1, a mismatched autonomous system number. OSPF does not use autonomous system numbers, does not use ASNs. This is for EIGRP and BGP, so this is nonsense. Number 2, an access list blocking traffic from the multicast address. This one. Well, if there was an access list preventing a multicast address destined to, not from, but destined to 224.0.0.5 or .6, not .10, .5 or .6, then this might get to an effect for communication, but this one is not. A mismatched process ID. Process IDs can be mismatched. It's okay. You can have 2 routers, one in process ID 1, the other is in process ID 2, but both of them must be in the same area, okay, in the same database. So this one can be done. It's no problem. A mismatched timers, definitely that is correct. This is number 1. This is router number 2. If this guy sends, hello, how are you? I'm using OSPF, how about you? And that will be every 10 seconds by default for Cisco routers. The other guy should also at the same time, at the same moment, using the same timer intervals, sends a hello back. So if one of them was configured to a different hello timers, this will affect, yes, definitely, like making it 5 seconds for the hello timer interval, then this will affect the relationship or the neighbor adjacency. So mismatch in the timers will do that. And last but the last one will be use of the same router ID on both devices. This is a catastrophe. Each one of them must have a unique RID, router ID. Okay, so D and E are correct for this one. Question 36. Which 2 statements about external BGP neighbor relationship are true? The 2 devices must reside in different autonomous systems. Definitely correct. If it was an internal BGP, because there is such thing, internal and external, then both of them should be in the same AS inside your company or your network. If it was an external, then both of them should be in different ASs, different networks. Neighbors must be specifically declared in the config, definitely correct, because in BGP you should specify your neighbor manually, statically by yourself. You will not leave the BGP to advertise and wait a hello or an LSA from another guy saying that, hey, I'm also using BGP. There is no such thing. You will advertise your neighbor, or you will assign your neighbor manually or statically. Yep. They can be created dynamically. Whom? Oh, the neighbors can be created dynamically after the network statement is configured. No, this is for EIGRP, RIP, and OSPF, not for BGP. The two devices must reside in the same autonomous system. No, that will be the opposite of A. The two devices must have matching timer settings. It's not OSPF. This will not affect the case. So A and B will be the only correct, and it's a choose two. 37. Which two pieces of info can you determine from the output of show NTP status command? We did use show NTP status in chapter 4. I believe it was the end of chapter 4 with the NTP lab when we had two routers. One of them was configured as a router, an NTP server. The other one was configured as an NTP client. And we issued the command of show NTP status. It gave the synchronization information, the IP of the server, and the stratum of the level of the server. So whether the NTP peer is statically configured, no, that was not in the options. The IP address of the peer, which the clock is synced, I believe it was this way. The configured servers was in the client, maybe whether this clock is synced or not, that will be correct. The NTP version number of the peer, no. So it's to choose two. This one is incorrect, this one is correct. The servers, the peer, the IP address of the peer, one of these guys. If I was a client, then it would tell me that I am synced to the server and the IP address of the server is this guy. Yeah, so it will be B. Okay, it will be B because it does show an IP address of that other part. Okay. 38. Which keyword in the NAT config enables the use of the outside IP address for multiple inside hosts? Yes, this has been removed from the CCNA, but I did mention that a lot of times back in chapter 4 in the NAT video. If you have one private public IP address and you want a lot of multiple privates to make use of that one public, then you will have to enable what's called a port address translation, PAT, or it's called the network address port translation, NAPT, or it's called NAT overload. Okay, the same meaning for those three different terms. So for enabling overload, one keyword you should add at the end of the command of a static NAT to make it become an overload. That will be overload. Okay, so the keyword overload, I did that in the lab also back in chapter 4, will change your lab from using static NAT to NAT overload, which is PAT, which is extremely important. Okay, 39. Which two pieces of info can you learn by viewing the routing table? Okay, the components of a routing table. A. Whether an access list was applied? No. You know routing tables, they do not show that. The EIGRP or BGP autonomous system. No, EIGRP will definitely be not showing. Neither BGP. BGP can show the BGP autonomous system by the command show BGP neighbor and some other commands. Whether the AD was manually or dynamically configured, yes. When? That will be when you have like a line in the routing table saying a static route with this destination and this next hop, but the AD of the static route is 2. Okay, you know that the default static route AD should be 1. Why is it 2? Then it was manually configured. So this is a manipulating option. Be careful, but it's correct. Okay, because you can conclude that from seeing or viewing the routing table. Which neighbor adjacencies are established? No. The length of time that a route has been known, definitely correct. which is those timers, all those timers here, you see? Okay, notably for question 39. Question 40. Which NAT term is defined as a group of addresses available for NAT use? Whenever you have a group of addresses that a NAT can use, then this is a pool. And we had a lab on dynamic NAT, which uses pools in chapter 4. Okay, so I hope that you did memorize or remember that. 41. Which command is used to enable LLDP on a Cisco iOS? You know that CDP is enabled by default on all Cisco devices. By the way, it says Cisco iOS ISR. What is that? Cisco iOS, the software of Cisco, but the software of the integrated services routers. Okay, so this is just the router from Cisco, and it's almost will be like obsolete maybe in 2021 or the end of 2020, and it will depend only on the aggregated services router, the ASR, those big, expensive yet powerful routers. They start from 10Ks up to more than $1 million, maybe. Depends on the cards and the options and these capabilities. But anyway, it uses iOS, the Cisco iOS software, the same software that shows in the packages, same commands. Okay, so CDP is enabled by default, LLDP is disabled by default. To enable LLDP or CDP, you type the command, the protocol, and then run. CDP run or LLDP run, one of them. Okay, so LLDP run will enable LLDP. CDP, if it was manual disabled, then you'll have to tap also CDP run to enable it. Yep, no, those are for CDP, the question is for LLDP. You see? Okay, 42. After you apply the given config to R1 and 2, you notice that OSPF v3 fails to start. Why? There is a unicast routing for IPv6 enabled on both of them. Thank you, no problem. The interface 00 has no IP, no IPv4. IPv6 is enabled. Okay, so link local will be automatically generated, but also did use another command, another IP address. It's advertising OSPF process area 1, area 0. There is process ID, yeah, we know that. And the router ID, even in OSPF v3, the router ID still remains being typed as a 32-bit address, which is like an IPv4. Okay, for the other guy, it's also the same thing. An IPv6 enabled, an IP address, an IPv6 in area 3. So you'll have one of the guys saying that this interface belongs to area 0, and the other guy says no, it belongs to area 3, and they will fight. Establish neighbor GCC will not be established. Okay, so the area numbers are mismatched, as you can see. Process ID can be mismatched, but area ID must be typical. Which command should you enter to configure a device as an NTP server? We have the lab, and it was NTP master. Yep, NTP master, and you should specify also a stratum for that. If you did not, it will be stratum 8. Which feature or protocol determines whether a quality of service on the network, I'm sorry, I need my pen, a quality of service on the network is sufficient to support IP services? Whether the quality of service is sufficient or not, that will not be those guys. Which protocol or which feature that you should also enable in your network to track and aid quality of service? That would definitely be IPSLA, not embedded event manager and not those discovery protocols. 45. Which feature is enabled by this config? Which config? IPNAT pool called Cisco pool starts from 10.1.1.0 ends at .50 with a subnet mask of 24. This is just creating a NAT pool. No, this is not a translation, not a DHCP pool. Yeah, this is creating a dynamic NAT address pool. Okay, not a path. Yep, that would be correct. And we have a lab with this same line and command in chapter 4. Hope that you did implemented it. In CDP environment, what happens when the CDP interface on an adjacent device is configured without an IP address? So what? CDP operates in layer 2. let's say that they are switches. They will not even have routers, IP addresses. I'm sorry. So if those guys does not have IP addresses, they will still negotiate some informations like system MAC address, port MAC address, system platform, software version, and just like we said, the native VLAN and some other informations, trunking informations maybe to us or such thing, or VDP. Yeah, so CDP becomes inoperable or inoperable. No, uses the IP address of another interface. Catastrophe. Operates normally, but it cannot provide an IP address. Yeah, no problem. Operates normally, but it cannot provide any information. No, it will provide a lot of information, just like MAC address. This is the first one that will be provided. Okay, so there is no problem with that. Which two statements about NTP is true? Are true. NTP uses UDP. Yes, back in the sheet you will see in the slides that it uses UDP 123. Cisco routers can act as both NTP authoritative server and client, and we did that in the lab definitely. Can act only as a server or only as a client? No. Uses TCP? No, it uses UDP 123. Okay, all of those informations are already discussed and proven in chapter 4. Which command should you enter to configure an LLDP delay time of 5 seconds? The commands of LLDP are already measured, already measured in seconds. So it should be something 5,000 means 5,000 seconds, 5,000 seconds. A hold time is not for a delay. It should be reinitiate to re-establish again. So it will be D. Okay, for the delay time of LLDP, just in case you need it. You needed it. Yeah. 49. Which value is used to determine the active router in an HSRP config? You remember that? No, you do not, because we did not implement the lab yet. Lab number 3 in the Mega Lab series, the English Mega Lab series, will be about HSRP, and by default, both routers in an HSRP environment have something that specify which one of them should be the active router, and that's called the router priority. But by default it's 100 here, 100 here, so you should change it, you should specify it. Okay, so by what we do in the lab, that we always increase this one make it like 120, 150, and decrease this one to make it like 80 or 60 or maybe 90, but just to guarantee that this one will always be the active router. But it says that the default config, if it was not changed, like both of them are still 100, then who will be the active? It will be the one with the biggest IP address. This one. Yep, not a loop back and not priority because it's not changed and it's equal. They are both 100. Tracking is not about that. Okay, so that will be the IP address of this one. 50. Which statement about CDP is true? It's a Cisco proprietary protocol. Yes, that's correct. It runs on the network layer. No. Layer 2, data link. It can discover information from routers, firewalls, and switches. I don't believe firewalls will be so friendly with that. It runs on the physical and data link layer. Yes, provides a lot of information regarding those two layers. So A and D will be correct. 51. Which value can you modify to configure a specific interface as a preferred forwarding interface? I have this switch that has two ports that are heading later on to a switch which is the root bridge. How can I specify which one is preferred to become an active and the other one to be blocked because of spanning tree? The interface number would be correct if it was this way, if I had this type of scenario. When I have two switches connected with more than one port and there is no ether channel, one of them should be blocked, and that guy will be the one having a lower number like 01, and 02 will succeed. I have talked about that a lot in chapter 2. Or the port priority is also correct. Back in the Arabic version of this slides, I have answered A because I have forgotten about the command that I haven't used before, which is changing a priority of one port, because I've always used PBST, so I would change the priority of a VLAN or such thing or an instance. but some guys reminded me that there is something called changing the port priority with the command. So this one will be definitely correct. You can enter this command or this interface and give it a much lower priority, like 16, and leave this one on the default, which may be 32,000 something, or 3,000 something. This one will be lower, so this one will be active and forwarding, the other one will be alternative and blocking. Okay, so that would be B in the spanning tree. You might see in the slides, at the end of the slides, that the correct answer is A. Sorry, that will be B, because they are already uploaded. Okay. 52. When configuring an Ether channel, which mode enables LACP only if a LACP device is detected? That is really tricky, because if I have a switch and another switch, and they are connected with more than one interface, and they are bundled from this side and this side, which mode on this switch will enable LACP after LACP is detected, after some other guy sends me a LACP message, a LACP negotiation message? Who would always send a LACP negotiation message? Another port that is definitely an active port. Okay, so if there was another guy that is active using LACP, active, not desirable for PACP, active for LACP, it would send me a startup or a negotiation message, then I would reply. Why did that guy started the negotiation, not me? Why is he more anxious to uh, bundling? Because I am passive. In that case, I am the passive interface, that I do know what LACP is, but I will wait for someone or a detection from another side to do that. Okay, so I will definitely be a passive guy waiting for another active one to initiate something with me. Okay, I would be very shy. Okay, 53. Which command should you enter to verify the priority of a router? Priority. I'm sorry, verify, not configure. Verify a priority of the router. Show standby. You will see that in the lab that I will record in 2 days coming. Show standby will show you this router is using HSRP with this virtual IP, this virtual MAC. This one is the active router, and its priority is like 120. And with a note that the default is 100 and 120 is manually configured. Okay, so that will be show standby, the command that will show you all of those information. 54. Which command do you enter so that router 1 R1 advertises its own loopback to the BGP peers? Let's see. This is interface loopback 0. It has this address, and this is another interface. This is router BGP. You see, statically you will specify your neighbor with its remote address, and later you should specify the command network xxxx mask xyyyy. That's it. This is the missing command here of advertising your network. Since the question asks to advertise your loopback, not your physical IP address interface, your physical address IP, then you should advertise this address. Okay, so it will be network 172.16.1.30. I'm sorry, .32 or 1 minute. So that R1 advertises the loopback 0 interface. Should I advertise the entire network of the loopback? Because the loopback is not /32 here. This is /27. Okay, one thing. Okay, this is /27. BGP does not understand wildcard masks. Does not understand wildcard masks. Does not understand wildcard masks. Only a subnet mask. So 27, 27, 27. That will be definitely the network. Okay, and if I should advertise the network, then I should advertise the network ID, which is an even number. So that will be this one. It will not be this one, because there is no M or mask in between them. the BGP requires you to type the keyword mask and then the mask, so this one will be incorrect, and 33 will be incorrect also. I think in the sheet or in the slide I have typed it should be A. We should advertise the network since there is no /32 here. Okay, if it was /27, then I should advertise the network. Okay, that would be A. Yep. And yeah, that is done. That's it. You see, it's question 54. I have answered D, but it should be A. I'm sorry. Yeah, that is the end of part 2. I hope that it was beneficial, clear, and informative for you. And just in case you have no comment, if you have a comment, you can type it below in the video. If you have no comment, then we can move to the next video, part 3. Thanks for watching and hope to see you in the upcoming video. Goodbye.